You're listening to IHC's Podcast. Today's topic is Culture is Medicine. Welcome to the IHC Podcast, where culture meets community. I'm Marissa, and I'm your host. I'm also a member of the Canyantito Band of Navajos. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the communications coordinator for the Indian Health Center of Santa Clara Valley, where we provide medical, dental, counseling, wellness, WIC, and prevention services to over 23,000 members while specializing in the unique care and needs of American Indians. Today, we're here with Julie. Want to introduce yourself?
Horchetuhi, Kanakraka, Julie Dominguez, Kanahini Dolores Sanchez. I greeted that's my native Chochenyo language. My name is Julie Dominguez. I come from the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe and descendancy from the Dolores Sanchez lineage.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we're here in honor of Cali Native Month or California Native Month. I don't know if it's like officially named that, but here at IHC, that was like what our theme for September. And so in honor of that, we wanted to invite you over to talk a little bit about the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe, the struggles that they faced and overcome so far. And yeah, can you share a little bit about the history of the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe?
Yeah, of course. So I would say one of the things that I like to mention is that we're the last of the surviving lineages coming from the mission systems in California, but specifically to the San Francisco Bay Area. So right now we're less than 600 or about 600 members left. And we actually had federal recognition status, but it was basically removed, wrongfully terminated, which is I think unique but not uncommon in California tribes. So right now we're trying to reaffirm that, or we are actually on a trail true to reaffirm the federal recognition status. So
yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss of the being federally recognized. When did that happen?
I would say it was around 1906 is when we were federally recognized under the Verona ban. And then somewhere in the 1940s, 1950s, around there, was when we were they basically left us off the land list for California tribes to receive land bases. It's basically the way that I explain to people is today, for example, you introduce yourself as Marissa from Indian Health Center, and then somebody in HR department makes an error, and tomorrow they're like, Marissa, you're no longer here. Even that's a wrongful termination, and that's the simplest, most just layman's terms way that I can explain it.
Okay. So possibly clerical error, maybe on purpose. And then from there your federal recognition just got terminated. So
also too there was just misinformation, and then I think just people not doing their due diligence back in those days with research and development back then. And so there's been a lot of historical findings from Albert Kroeber, who was a professor, I believe UC Berkeley. It was mentioned in one of our, we just did a Santa Clara symposium. This was our second annual this past year. And it was brought up about, that research about basically the professor, what he did with his students was to go out, and he was supposed to, kind of like the census, go out, find the Native Americans in the area and talk to them. But the one thing they failed to do was to find the Indigenous Native Americans in the area and talk to them. So with that research, they took that to the federal government and basically were able to say, we were extinct, and that's just not true either.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with our next question. What misconceptions have you heard about the Muwekma Ohlone people, and how do you usually address them?
Well, I think first I would start with the second part of that question is addressing anything is just having an open safe space and having an open dialogue on both sides, because there's what I have to say, and then there's knowing that the person, how they're going to perceive it may not be as open-minded. But also, so then the second or the first part of that question of well, what are they? There's a few, but I think the biggest one is thinking that it's this fight for federal recognition, it's always tied to a monetary value, and it's not. There's so much more to that. Again, it goes back to saying we're the last of the surviving lineages from the mission system. And just thinking about that in itself, people don't realize how many languages were lost through those tribes. How many families they don't carry not one drop of bloodline that's surviving today. So when you think about, like, you know, people having a misconception about that it's about monetary value, it's really not. It's about preserving what's here, and then also protecting the ancestral burial sites. I think the other part of it too is like Ohlones in general are classified under one lump of like everybody's Ohlone, and there's also misinformation with maps that are out there. So there are maps that are like, if you read the fine print, it'll literally say that it's the language or the village site that was there, but some of those villages, again, like through genocide, they no longer exist. And so people not having the education behind them or having a resource to ask those questions, like, can you explain to me what is comprised of the Ohlones, or like how are they separated through the different territories? So I mean, like literally the entire San Francisco Bay Area, that's the representation for Muwekma Ohlone. You know, you have more coastal Monterey, that's like Ashland, Rumson, down south more towards like past like Gilroy, Watsonville. Don't quote me on this, guys. But I mean, again, because you know I'm not perfect with this information either. But then you have the Amamutsin. So in essence, it's, you know, you have Muwekma, Rumson, Ashland, and you have Amamutsin. So, but Ohlone is, you know, the name of all the tribes in that areas.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with I'm also a peer mentor at San Jose State University. And one of my peer mentees, I was talking to them, and she was sharing with me her name, which I thought was super cool. I probably won't pronounce it right. I only know the first part is her nickname. Okay, guys, don't get mad at me. Sorry. So her name is Anpetu, and that is a shortened version of her full Lakota name, which is a good red day. And I was like, that's beautiful. And so because she was telling me, oh, my name, you know, Lakota, I was like, oh, like my head, I was like, oh, you're Lakota. Cool. And I was like, what's it like? Have you been to the reservation? She's actually, she was from the Rumson band of Muwekma. And she's mixed, and she's another thing. It's escaping me now. But it's just, we were talking about the different bands and how, you know, she was asking if other tribes have something similar, and I'm like, oh, 100%, because I'm from the Kenitito band of Navajo, so I'm still part of Greater Navajo Nation. My band was one of the ones that broke off during the long walk, after, you know, the Europeans brought us to New Mexico to go fight off the Spanish, and they're like, okay, cool, you fought them for us, go back home. And so there's a few different bands that broke off, and they're in like Shiprock, they're in Chinle, they're in Crown Point. And my family's in Tahajle. It was formerly named Canyoncito, like Little Canyon. And that's why that band is called the Canyoncito Band.
Oh, and that's cute.
Yeah, Little Canyon. And and I was like, yeah, there's different tribes with different tribal bands, even like Ojibwe tribes. They have, I got a chance to visit the Milex band of Ojibwe in Minnesota, Hinckley, Minnesota, shout out. So it's really nice to hear like that is not uncommon with other tribes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is like what's not uncommon, and I think it's also a misconception is, and I know it's an uncomfortable topic for a lot of people to address or understand, but is like the classification of like what is a tribe, right? And then also like there are illegitimate tribes, and what does that mean? And I think for us, what gets really sad, and why I said it's not a common topic, but it's basically like these are family members that just broke away and created something new. I mean, the other political side of this, the way that people can look at it is anybody can file 501c3, claim a tribal status, but that's still really sad, because when we're facing what we are with still genocide, in the sense that if we want to talk about blood quantum, in less than 200 years, most Ohlones, like that blood quantum is like, it's very diluted. And it becomes about preserving who the Ohlones were. And that's just the reality of what it is. And so instead of like creating something new, we should be working together. In a lot of the spaces, we're just not.
And that's hard. It's a hard reality to face. And I mean, like, so much could get done if we put our differences aside and work together.
Exactly, unify. And I think, but I would say I brought that up because like how this young lady that you mentor, you know, her understanding, like, is this around, like, just having different tribes and different bands? But then also through, like, what we are doing right now with this Trail of Truth, I'm finding a lot of other nations face the same issues and the same, like, just pain that we do with trying to move forward while bringing everybody with us and educating the community at the same time that we live in. So
yeah, and then even what you mentioned with like the blood quantum, and I know this is going to get heavy for folks who maybe are not too familiar with Native cultures, and then just like the ongoing continual genocide of Indigenous peoples and erasure. But for Navajo Nation, I'm one half blood quantum because my dad is Navajo, my mom was not. If we were going by tribal rules, I probably wouldn't even be considered Navajo because my mom wasn't the one who was Native. It's a maternal like bloodline thing. But according to Navajo Nation, I'm half. Yay! But only my children will be allowed to claim Navajo lineage, being federally recognized, and my grandchildren, great grandchildren, they won't be a part of Navajo Nation if they continue to be less than 1/4 Navajo.
Oh wow, and that's really sad. Like we don't go by a blood quantum. We go just as long as we can trace back your lineage, and for that's important. Because again, going back to like the misconceptions about like it just being monetary, the tribe does a lot in the community that a lot of people just don't see. I mean, again, being less than 600, there's less than that amount of members who are even, not because they don't want to, but for like their own livelihoods, they cannot participate to like show up in a lot of these spaces that we are. Sitting on like councils or boards or advocating. The most that they can do sometimes is write a letter or show up to an event. But when you talk about like blood quantum and why that's important and just like federal recognition, all these kind of things, there's also like ICWA, right? And with ICWA being overturned, if a child, I even look at it like from the Navajo Nation, like if a child can't be classified as Navajo, does ICWA apply to that child? Do they protect them then? And for Muwekma, that's why I'm thankful we don't have a blood quantum, because we actually do have families that reach out. And, they, for whatever reason, they're not able to use like ICWA because we're not federally recognized. I know that there are some specific like legalities that kind of protect the child, but that's really sad, because then if they all they knew was somewhat of like an indigenous aspect but weren't raised religious, now they're forced to be into a home where it's no different than the boarding schools and the Catholic laundry services and the Catholic mission systems in general.
Yeah, I know all of this is an effort to protect our future generations. So I applaud Muwekma Ohlone for all the work that they've done, and just the continuing of trying to reclaim that federal recognition, or at least let folks know that you're here, you're still here.
Exactly.
We still exist. You can't erase us. One of my favorite quotes, and it just says it's a proverb. It doesn't say like there wasn't a person it was credited to, but it's basically, you tried to bury us, but you didn't know that you buried the seeds. So I feel that when I hear you all talking about what's going on and your ongoing efforts with like Trail of Truth and everything.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, especially like at least for myself personally, that I've stepped into the role to do the land acknowledgements, and that's been even offered, and we have like these places that are like giving us an opportunity to even at the very least say we're still here. Because when we, at the end of it, we started to do like our prayers in our own native language, Chochenyo, and that alone, I noticed like it just in the room, at least for myself, is empowering, because it's like literally waking up like the ancestors around that. Okay, even if these people aren't hearing me loud now, let them hear at least this words in your language, and you take it back to them in some small form or fashion, that in their daily lives, maybe they're going to pass a burial ground and they're going to be like, oh, okay, something feels off about here. Like, what is in this area? They might not. And the reason I say that is because there are so many unmarked burial sites within San Francisco Bay Area. And, like, the one for people who are, like, familiar with, like, at least San Jose, you'll hear me say this a lot for the people who, hear me do land acknowledgements in, like, the last year or so, is, like, the call out to the 87, 85 southbound freeway. There's, like, these huge solar panels that are, like, right before the Oak Ridge Mall exit. And that's a huge gravesite right there. There was a large excavation that was done from the tribe in the early 80s. and or actually maybe early 90s. And like pretty much a lot of the people who are in that, there's a video out, it's called Muwekma Back from Extinction, and they're not here anymore. Like they're now our ancestors, like my great grandma, my mom, aunties, you know, and we removed the ancestors just to put them to the side of the freeway. We're not federally recognized. We don't have a land base. We don't have like a, you know, a dedicated cemetery place for them. And we put the in trust, just like these treaties everywhere, like, hey, we're going to move them and you're not going to touch them. And then without knowledge or without consent, they put these solar panels. So every time I pass by that freeway, I say a prayer in what I know in my native language, you know, that I'm here. Like, I didn't forget you. Like, give me strength. Give me love. You know, because in our language, not everything translates exactly, but that's pretty much, you know, what it translates to. And that way I can give back to them and give back to the people. And that's just one gravesite, but there are so many of that. You know, I'm like, again, you know, I'm a mom, single mom, 2 kids, you know, and I pass by these places every day and I'm like on the go. And sometimes it's literally all I can offer at the time is just a small prayer in my language.
And I mean, any acknowledgement at that point is, you know, worthwhile, especially with you taking the time to give a prayer. And even like you said, in your busy day, when you're driving on the freeway, you don't necessarily like consider the history of those areas that were taken to be part of like infrastructure for like major cities. And I remember when I learned about the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe when I first moved here, because I'm from Stockton. I don't even know the folks on my native homeland in Stockton, really. Because growing up there, I was really disconnected from my Indigenous heritage. Like, my dad's Navajo, and he's like, yeah, you're federally recognized. Okay, cool, that's it, bye. And I'm like...
yeah, just left to the wolves.
And so in high school, the kids would be like, oh, okay, Pocahontas, all right. And I thought your people were extinct, and just very disrespectful. And my sister and I were the only Native kids at that high school that I knew of. I mean, statistically, there were probably way more Natives, but nobody that claimed it, and nobody that knew that they were a part of any type of tribe. And it wasn't until I moved to the Bay Area that I was like immersed in Native culture, because again, this is one of the biggest hubs. San Jose is a big hub for relocation during the Indian Removal Act, and when they were taking children from their families' homes and their native homeland to kill the men, or to kill the Indians, save the men. And so that's why San Jose is like a really big intertribal community. And I mean, even through that suffering, we've kind of thrived because we're connecting to other Native cultures and just creating that big intertribal community of learning other people's ways and, you know, respecting each other.
Right.
But in Stockton, like, again, there's like, you don't think about that every day. And then when I moved here and I was learning about the Muwekma Ohlone people, I learned one of the things that I was taught was that there was like burial mounds, and that there's all these different unmarked burial sites, and you never know if there's like a hill that you drive by or that you step on that might be ancestral burial site. And just to be respectful of the land no matter where you're going. And I was like, oh, okay. And like before that, I was like, oh, I never thought of that.
You know, I've actually had somebody ask me, though, anyways, like, so, like, kind of, I don't want to go backwards, but, like, you asked the question about, like, misconceptions or, like, how do we answer questions or that kind of stuff. I would also say there's also hard questions to answer. And sometimes I wouldn't necessarily say anything negative about the person so much as it's a lack of education or how they ask a question. So, like, 2 things. One, I've had one person kind of ask, like, okay, humanity has existed for hundreds and thousands of years, and there are probably, like, ancestral burial grounds, like, everywhere. How do you know, like, what does it really matter, basically? Because how do you know, like, it wasn't redeveloped even by your people, and so on and so forth? And then second thing, too, I've, like, also been asked, like, why is it even, like, what do the land acknowledgements really do? Like, when people aren't paying attention or people don't listen, like, then what is the purpose? Like, what value do you bring at that point? And those are 2 hard questions, but the correlation between them is that sometimes it's, even if one person hears what I have to say, like, that is me more, that's the value, because that one person will spread a good seed, like you said, right? Is that it goes back into, like, if we were to see a burial ground right now, like a graveyard was across the street, and we're like, you know what, Marissa, let's build a new Indian health center across the street. Let's just go and dig it up. Forget asking any of these people whose families they belong to,
Mm-hmm.
there would be a riot. There would be a war. There would be like atrocities to come because us touching those remains.
Mm-hmm.
So it shouldn't be about what was done in the past. Like it should always be done about how do you progress in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be about protecting what is the future. So again, if it was your gravesite, wouldn't you want the future generations to protect you? Of course. And some people, you have to put it back to question, like, okay, again, it's like, it's not an easy conversation to have. And as long as you're respectful, I would say most people, I haven't had anybody who was really defensive or offended by me saying it, but putting it back to the question to them of, if this was your child, if this was your grandma, if this was somebody you knew in your lifetime, wouldn't you do everything in your power to protect them? Wouldn't you say every word you could? Wouldn't you fight to like your last breath? Bring back the dances, bring back the songs. Wouldn't you, if you didn't know your culture then, wouldn't you try to find it now?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're like, well, yeah, of course. Okay, so that's where we're at. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why we protect these, or we are fighting to protect these grave sites or fighting to protect our homelands.
Yeah, and that's empowering. You're giving them perspective. And
yeah, exactly.
Trying to appeal to their empathy, if they have it. If you're not talking to
I haven't had anybody who had a lack of empathy so far. So, I guess I'll knock on this piece of wood right here that, that doesn't go away. But, yeah, it's not ever easy. But I don't ever shy away from those conversations because too many people do that. And then we wonder why there's no progression in our community.
Yeah, I know. It's fun. So there's some days when I'm on and I can totally answer questions that are hard, and other days I'm like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
But I like the days when I'm on because I'm like, oh, are you ready for this? I don't think you're ready. So I applaud you for that work. And then just also appealing to people's like empathy and to, try to help change their perspective. I know that is hard work, especially as somebody who works in the Indigenous community here and just the ridiculous questions that we get. But I try to approach everybody, with the same sense of empathy and respect and just knowing that this person's, maybe they do try to mean me harm with that question. But just putting that barrier up that, okay, like I get what you're trying to do with this question, but I'm not going to allow you to hurt me with your words because of this. So thank you for that. I know it's hard work. What are some things that that the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe is doing to keep their culture alive today?
Well, I would say I want to give huge shout outs to our current chairwoman, Charlene Nijme, and my Ektaka Joey, which means big brother in our language. Well, Joey's his name though. But Charlene, because, since she's taken on her role, she's been like full force. We're going to revitalize song, dance, things, and it didn't come overnight. We had to learn and we had to go through a process, figuring it out, finding the right people to put in place and, things like that. But man, she's a literal force to not be reckoned with in the sense that, she's a real go-getter. She built herself from the ground up in her business on her personal side, and then she's brought those connections to the tribe. So what I mean by that is, when it comes to, like, again, when we just talked about, like, having hard conversations, Charlene doesn't run away from the hard conversations. And I think our people need that right now, which is why the Trail of Truth happens. So she's able to like be in communities that I feel like we didn't always have the chance before in the same light. And so yeah, through her leadership, then she's also counted people that have taken on new roles. We have different faces coming into the tribe and people stepping into different areas that, we hadn't been public with before, like the song and the dance and stuff like that. The regalia making, the tabling that we do, it's a lot different. It had been done, not to discredit any other members that have been doing this work for 40 plus years. It's just a lot different. And I feel like we've been a lot more vigilant with her being our chairperson. So I appreciate that. And then with my brother Joey, he's always had that fighter warrior spirit. And when I say like his existence was detrimental to the dance and song revitalization, it was. There were already singers and song carriers, but my brother, from being a sun dancer to being able to really put in the work and dedication to not just our community, but like the Mexicasteka community, and being a fire carrier in that space with Capulito Nolenque, he also bridged that community with bringing back not even bringing back, but starting the first ever Kelly Nights out here. I mean, that's only something you can dream of to happen on your homelands. I was a part of the powwow circle since I was 4 years old. Thankful to Indian Health Center. I had a space to dance and teach at one point. And then I stopped, but then it's not the same. I'm so appreciative, like I really am, of what the Indian Health Center has done and offered to me and always supported. But there's just something that was different when my brother was able to bring me in for the first time to a roundhouse or even just a big time, and not like hearing about them, hearing about the hand games, hearing about seeing with the clappers, seeing various like dancers that were like Cali Native women dancers and like, or the men, and being like, you identify, you could feel it in here, but you don't know it. And so the fact that like, one of the first places my brothers danced out here was Garden at the Flea at the San Jose Flea Market off Berryessa. I mean, if that's empowering, because first of all, like San Jose Flea Market, a lot of people know it, but also too, like, this is where we grew up, these are our backyards, these are our so and then how he's made the connections, and then all the other members too who have contributed. I don't want to just highlight 2 people, because there are a lot of members who do great things. And then the tabling of events, right? With Monica and Gloria Ariano sisters, even the stuff they still do today with Indian Health Center. I know they do like abalone classes or making shells, clapper stick classes, and things like that. And they go out and they educate the community too. So I think right now, those are all long answers, but to say, like, as a collaborative effort, Muwekma is literally out there in any way, in any capacity that we can. It's just a matter of how much resources we can bring, the making sure that we bring value to a place, and just, that we're in a safe, positive environment that I think it's received in the way it needs to be.
That's good. Wow, it's a lot of work that you all are doing.
It's a lot of work, and we just don't have enough hands on deck at the moment, which is why the Preservation Foundation was founded, which is like the other kind of like sister hand to like the tribe, of basically to support the federal recognition efforts, but more on the revitalization side, and then the land trust, things like land stewardships. But it's also more of a formal process. I think before it was like all through like texts and emails.
Oh yeah, it's like, hey, can you please?
And it gets lost. And so it's also exciting to know that we've grown like that, and we've actually built out like the board. So I have myself with community education chair. We have a new language chair, Bernadette Quiros, which is my cousin, and then my older brother leading as a cultural bearer for like dance and song. So I think those 3 things, in the next year, once our families get back from the Trial of Truth, we have a lot of good things planned out.
That's really good. Like I said, busy.
Oh, yeah.
And in our last episode of the IHC podcast with Ash Franston, we were talking about the Preservation Fund, and just like there's a new process for folks if they are in the Bay Area and looking for educational services like land acknowledgement or a different type of service that's offered on that website. It's muwekma.org is the website, or?
So you can go to muwekma.org, and there's a link through there too. I have to actually look at the website because I can't tell you where it's at. But I know for sure if you go to Muwekma Preservation Foundation.org, then under there is a thing about events. And from events, like if you want a conference, like to start the land acknowledgements, presentations, there's a link and a form that you can fill out.
Yeah, and we'll have the link above us here if you're watching us on YouTube. Feel free to also click the link in the description if you're interested. What are some important cultural traditions or ceremonies practiced in the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe?
Well, first I'll say it's changed. I think when I like from a little kid to now, it was I feel like we followed like a lot of like the general like what the other nations were doing, because like you said, we've been around other nations. And to be honest, I think I haven't really seen like what is like a general traditional, because tradition has changed through the years in leadership. But as of now, I would say the biggest one is always acknowledging the ancestors first and foremost, which was always done in the past, but just said differently, or different prayers, or just a different way, which is cool. But also now is making sure that we the offerings, like if we gather sage, if we're gathering anything for anything, doesn't matter what it is, shells, whether we offer like a piece of our hair and a prayer or a song, things like that. I think the other thing too is always opening up in like a circle, making sure that everybody's feeling welcome, making sure everybody understands like where we're at and what we're here to accomplish, or even after an event, making sure we get together. I think that's the general. In terms of like other cultural like practices, it's also, I think it's unique is we also learned this from our Miwok relatives as we were learning to make our regalias, is that any time that you work on your regalia, your pieces, like you need to be wearing a skirt, whether that's a ribbon skirt or like not a skirt you would dance in the ceremonies, but like having there's a different Cali style kind of skirt, like making sure that you're wearing, or even just a long skirt in general. So I thought that was really neat. And then also, but I've also had this been told to me before, so I don't think it's just like Muwekma related, but like as you work on regalia, as you work on anything that is considered medicine, right? Whether it's our necklaces or jewelry pieces or anything, the clapper stick, you're wrapping sage, you're making a gift from somebody, like you need to make sure that your mind is in a good, clear, conscious, like humble, just like the most positive way that it can be, because whatever you feel goes into whatever you're creating. So even if that means you got to take water and go take a step out. And I think it's a little different when you got all the aunties at the table and they're eating and they're being chismosas and talking, or just being gossip or whatever, you know what I mean? We all get into that, but reminding each other when we're in that space of like, hey guys, you know, let's focus on this part of it, or just changing the subject without even having to say it.
Yeah.
So I think those are like kind of like different, and yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Because I've taken part in making like jewelry, like medicine bags, things like that, and that was one of the other things that was reinforced for me as well, is that you do all of this with the positive vibe. Also, if you are ever cutting sage, you know, you say prayers, you talk to the plants, you tell them what you're doing, what they're going to be used for, and how you hope that they will continue to impact lives even well past that piece of sage being clipped off of their bush. And with each plant that you approach, you do the same process. You say, you know, I'm taking this, please, if you would please let me have this. This is going to be used for medicine, and you just continue to say thank you and prayers while you're harvesting that sage, and that you never cut pieces that are starting to like bloom with like seeds and stuff, because that's going to continue to help the sage plant grow. And as somebody who grew up disconnected from my indigeneity, that was not something that I learned growing up. I got to learn when I was little, like fishing with my family who are from the reservation, and I remember going fishing with them, and they're like, we're going to go pick up some candy at the store before we get to like where we're fishing at. I'm like, okay, cool. I pick up the candy, and I'm about to start eating it in the car, and my cousins are like, no, you don't eat it. The candy is going to be a gift. And I'm like, a gift to what? Yeah. And they're like, it's a gift to the lake that we're gonna be at. We're gonna give it to one of the tallest trees that we can find, because the trees are an ecosystem. They work and they support each other. And if you give an offering, you can take something from that area. And you never, like when we fished, I'm a little kid. I'm like 6 years old.
Yeah.
I'm a city native. And after my uncle gutted the fish, I'm over here poking it with a stick. And I remember being scolded so bad. My uncle was like, Marissa, you don't do that. You don't disrespect it. It's going to be that the guts and stuff that we don't eat are something that a fox or something is going to come by and eat. Like, that's their food. You don't mess with their food. And so things like that I've learned slowly but surely throughout the years. No longer do I poke fish guts, I promise, okay? But, yeah.
If you do, just put them to the side.
So that's really good, and I'm glad that you're able to like share those things with us about making sure that the positive intent is there when you're creating gifts that are going to be medicine for other folks. I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but how does the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe connect and protect the land in the Bay Area?
Well, aside from our own activism efforts of, whether it's like protests and rallies and, building out our social media platforms, we also partner with like open space authorities, or just like in Green Foothills, a lot of environmental organizations that support us, or we could support them. It's a collaborative thing. And a lot of it too is because there's like a lot of plant revitalization, and there's a lot of like ethnobotanists or just botanists that will work with the tribe to like classify like if we have history, and then we kind of like share. But I think like right now a lot of like when you talk about like protecting, a lot of it just comes down to the activism work we do, and then as we build out land stewardship programs, that will get a lot more vigilant in terms of our presence. I will say it's sometimes like hard because a lot of like when you talk about the sage and things like that, about there's like a certain way that like Indigenous communities, we just have this tie to that plant that most people just don't understand. And there's like overgrowth of sage in a lot of parts of California. And so we also, when you talk about protecting, is like educating communities that you don't just have to use sage. There are other plants like you can use for different healing purposes. So it's a different way of protecting the land, but it's done so in such a way where at least people aren't overusing it or using it in a like being wasteful of the plant. Because there's actually some government entities that are using sage as landscape. But I mean, not anybody can go and harvest sage. You actually, if you're not like proven tribal descendancy, you technically, some laws prohibit you from actually harvesting the sage in these like private entities. So that's kind of sad too, because then the plant just completely dies and there's no upkeep. And I've seen that for myself. So I know for myself, for like my project I graduated from Green Foothills in 2021, and one of my biggest projects was to try to like do just that, was protect or try to start a small land stewardship to protect the sage plants and different other plants that were just dying at a garden that was covered through Caltrans. But like my project got lost because there was no contact for anybody who was willing to help with that. So different efforts in different ways, like from small to big, of protecting them. I think right now is us being vocal.
That's good. Well, having a voice for the voiceless.
Exactly.
I mean, unless you're part of the mushroom psycelium stuff where the plants can talk to each other. That's how the plants share messages, if you're wondering. But at IHC, we believe that culture is medicine. So what does culture is medicine mean to you?
It means it's life. Your medicine for you is literally, I think, what keeps you going. I think it's different depending on who you ask. But for me personally, culture as medicine literally ties down to like who I'm going to be like when I'm not here no more. I know that's an awkward way of saying it, but the other way I say things to people is like, you're your future ancestor. And then that, like, it's medicine. And so like the culture, what we live and what we do today, like that would be nothing if we don't do it. So if I wouldn't wear my ribbon skirt, and there's no picture of that, if I don't wear my shell or make shell or teach my kids language or teach my kids anything about the culture, like, and if I'm gone tomorrow and I didn't teach my child to survive or to pick up the pieces that I left, when they're struggling to find who they are and their identity, that is medicine, like literally through addictions of people, through just their livelihoods of like everyday stuff. sometimes it's just holding that sage bundle, maybe not even lighting it because you're in a bad place, or maybe it's listening to powwow music even if you don't know the lyrics or the song, and you just can feel that drum beat in you, and or maybe it's, I don't know, it could be wearing your ribbon skirt in a place, or maybe you don't have a ribbon skirt but it's like you're at the powwow and you kind of feel yourself just like move, or whether it's making your traditional foods, or it could just be that you're just thinking of an ancestor, or you're thinking about how proud you are to be Native, because it looks different for everybody. So I think for me, it's thinking about all of that, like the culture itself is medicine, and keeping up with who I am and who I want to be and who I'll be when I'm gone.
I love that. There's also like, I've seen it on social media too, where it's like, be a good ancestor.
Yes.
What can you do today? Like you were saying, normalize wearing a ribbon skirt, normalize wearing your traditional regalia, normalize wearing your jewelry from your culture, and just being okay with that. Because I know so many youth that are, the youths, I love saying that, so many youths are, they're coming of age, they're getting used to this like awkward existence, and some of them are shying away from their traditional ways because they're like, well, it's embarrassing, I don't want to wear that, like nobody else wears their hair like this, nobody else grows their hair out this long, I'm supposed to be a boy, boys don't have long hair, and it's just like the Western idealization just impacting the way that they view themselves. And even other folks here in the Bay Area, they're like, oh, well, I'm supposed to look this way and I don't like these features. I'm like, well, the features of your face are part of your ancestral lineage. Like, that nose is the nose that your grandma had. Those eyes are the eyes that your grandpa had. Like, you are the accumulation of all the ancestors that survived, and you are like their prayers.
Yep. I seen that meme, and I seen the one where it literally says like, like you, everything that you're doing, don't quote me on the quote on this meme, but it was basically like, you are like literally everything that your ancestors prayed about, number one. But two is that, like, I think back, I mean, I was part of the Indian House Center youth group when I was young, and that's how I met a lot of my really good friends. A few of them have passed, sadly, and we would go and travel to, like, and our youth group would go to different conferences. Shout out to Sharon Torres, because she was awesome back then. But, I think it comes with age and experience, because, like, back then, like, Sharon was all about us being like, dude, we didn't wear ribbon skirts back then. That actually wasn't a thing for us to, like, do, because it also wasn't, like, I don't know, a lot of people just weren't doing it unless you were a powwow dancer, I guess.
Yes.
So that's something that's new, but like, just being around each other with like other natives, like, you just knew that like you guys were connected. So like, that was really awesome. And I had been a part of other youth groups where like I went to conference, and it's like not the same. Like, everybody is just like in that mindset, like you said, it's like, what's cool, what's fad. But I would say, my advice to you, not that you asked, but my advice for like the young ones is, don't regret it. Just do it, because in my 30s now, I look back, and I even told a relative this, like, I had left the powwow circle and dancing, and I mean, I am not light as a butterfly as I used to be, so do not ask me to get back out there with the fancy show anytime soon. But I feel like I regret the most is when you talk about culture being medicine, is that I struggled a lot. I struggled a lot through like being a teen mom and a young mom, and just navigating life in general. And this one relative that I had that was bringing me into the dance classes and having me teach, I told her, like, just like 2 years ago, I said, I used to look at you and Sharon, I'd be so pissed because you guys would be like so hard on me, and just so hard on all the kids in the community of like, don't do this or don't do that, or like, do this, do that, and we didn't want to, we rebelled. And I'm like, I wish I just would have listened. I wish I would have, stayed connected. If ribbon skirts were a thing back then, I would wear them proudly. I would go to school and focus more on like the education, while uplifting the culture of like embracing I'm Indigenous. Even if you don't know your culture, because I know a lot of these youth, they don't. They come, when they're part of the youth groups, they know they have a descendancy somewhere. They just don't know where. And I also encourage them to not be discouraged, to like shy away just because you don't know. At the end of the day, like, your ancestors, maybe you just haven't found them yet for them to speak life to you that way. But also too is like if the general powwow circle is like your circle, and like don't get so stuck on finding where your tribe is at in the moment. Embrace what you have in front of you, because you're gonna find it. It's gonna come to you. And that was for me. I wasn't necessarily doing a lot. I wasn't really connected to Muwekma as a child, or even into my teens. But, I was out there dancing, and I was out there, with making relatives, through, all of the people who were here from the Relocation Act, the Locotas, Hank and Sherry LeBeau were literally, my second parents growing up. Indian House Center was, a second home, with feeling you can make a Native joke and you're not being made fun of. It's you are, but it's in a different sense. It's all out of love.
They're laughing with you, not at you.
Exactly. But yeah, so as so winded answer to just tell all the young ones out there is embrace your culture, because you're gonna regret it as you get older. But I wouldn't say just embrace it, but find ways, and I think they're doing an amazing job now. I see the social media, I pay attention, I see what's out there, and I think what they're doing even now, with the support systems they have, they're doing awesome, and they need to keep doing that, because it's not just about embracing. If I wore a ribbon skirt every day, but I was not in a good place in my life, and I wasn't trying to make every day count to be what am I actually doing with wearing the ribbon skirt to empower me or my people, or if I wore my necklace every day but I don't have no meaning, there's no bearing, there's no value, I don't pray with it. Again, what efforts does that have? So I also think it's a combination from embracing who you are and making sure that you're being progressive in your everyday life to better yourself and the communities that you live in.
Yeah. That could not have been said any better. And I like that of, reminding the youths to stay in touch with their culture, because as you age, that might be something that you wish you would have done more. Yeah. For myself, too, I can totally say yes, because just, again, growing up being disconnected and then moving to the Bay Area and then feeling way more connected. And because we're such a big intertribal community, of course I found my cousins from Navajo Nation. Of course I found elders who did not shy away in helping me learn about traditional Navajo ways. I'll shout out to Ella and Bob. Shout out to Lucy, my elders in Navajo Nation, and they never made me feel like I was less than, because I grew up in the city, and they shared how they had to go through relocation and just moving from the res to here, and just the city being a scary place because they're not from here, and that they empathized with me having grown up here completely disconnected. They're like, at least we grew up knowing our ways, and poor you grew up here and you didn't have anybody to reach out to or talk to. And they shared with me some of the traditions for Navajo Nation, and it was beautiful. And just knowing that there's those types of people out there was empowering, and that you're not alone. So there are resources. What organizations and communities have supported Muwekma Ohlone, and how can other folks continue to support?
Well, I would say, Indian House Center has been a big support, whether it's the collaborations from powwows and Cali Nights, to just providing space or working collaboratively with us on different projects that we do. But then also too, there's a lot of nonprofits that help us. Even Green Foothills working with us from the environmental side, Mid-Peninsula, Open Space Authority, you have and then the private institution, Santa Clara University. We partner with them to do a camp out over the summer with the kids. So they get a college experience, and they work with a professor, and they get to build out stuff where they're on display throughout the year for Santa Clara University students. There's also a collaboration with a garden over at Stanford University, where we have our Muwekma garden called the 4 Directions. And, we have open access to that, whenever we want. We can go out there and just, bring plants that we want to see come to life. And then they also offer space for us back to do, projects with them. There's also collaboration like on other cultural or and like places and just organizations like the Mexica Azteca community with Capulito Nolenque, you know, and you know a lot of us too. Like we're not just Muwekma, we're other ethnicities too, and you know a lot of us are Mexica, and so you know being you know they're being that they're here. They do so much also to make sure that we're acknowledged, just like you know all the other partners that I mentioned to you or support systems. And I think those right now that I can like at least speak to, like they mean a lot, because without that support, a lot of some projects, I mean Muwekma does like the footwork, of course, but there's always needing that like helping hand, and they provide that space. And then there's a lot of like individuals that help, you know, like they're not part of an organization per se, or there's a lot of other ones. So if I missed you, thank you, and everybody who's ever provided support and still providing. And then you also have other tribal nations like the Lokotas, you know, I know who's out there on the Trail of Truth. There's a lot of support out there from the Lokotas, so we appreciate all of that. I think how people can continue to support, and if like now's a good time, I think is mentioning the Trail of Truth, is because like as we've talked in the beginning, like the purpose of Trail of Truth is the reaffirmation for federal recognition. And as I mentioned too, like you know our very fearless but dedicated chairwoman Charlene Nijman and her family, you know, and then my brother Joey have and other people as well have planned out this trail, which was kicked off August 4th, Chrissy Field, San Francisco, and it's a horseback trail ride, basically from San Francisco Bay Area, which is our homelands, all the way across the United States to Washington D.C. To be there by election day to call to action of we're here, we want to have our federal recognition status reaffirmed, we want it back. And it's not just for Muwekma. That's the misconception that I waited to the end to bring up, is because most people see it as like it's a fight for just Muwekma. But if you really pay attention, this is a wake-up call that for any and all tribes that have faced this injustice through California and the federal government's broken process, which the BIA has actually been quoted to say that they understand that the process for federal recognition is broken, and we could be doing a better job. This isn't because we just want a land base. Of course that we do, but it's so much more than that. Like we do need land, but it's not in the way that you think. We're not coming in here like eminent domain. I want to take over all of Willow Glen and Los Gatos Hills. That first of all, that wouldn't happen. And second of all, that's not who we are, what we are trying to do. Yeah. But you do need federal recognition to repatriate. And for people who don't know what that is, it is literally to take back the ancestral remains and artifacts that these private institutions like UC Berkeley, you know, Stanford, all these institutions that have remains, to give them back to the tribes. But the one broken part of that process is you have to be federally recognized. And so for us not being federally recognized, like we have to lean on what we would say like a big brother tribe who already is a part of the NAGPRA process, that they can go and repatriate on our behalf. And I the one story I tell people is because they don't realize like why it's important or like what's weird about it, why it's broken, is the first reburial that I was a part of. It was literally an ancestral remains that were at a children's museum, like in the basement. And when you think about that, it's like, what did a children's museum, like the Discovery Museum, for example, it's not them, but if it was like that, what would a place like that be doing with the ancestral skull remain? Like it doesn't make sense. There's that part. And then to be in the room, and again, this is like probably not the most comfortable topic, but it's the reality of what we face, is we've been a part of burials, like meaning like we have funerals in our everyday life, like unfortunately. But when you see a skull that's just a skull, and know that that's all that was recovered, and like maybe an artifact, and you need to touch that remain and remove it and put it into another box so that way you can rebury. I don't know how many people can stomach that, first of all. And it's not like we want to do that. We have to. It's our responsibility as Muwekma and every other tribe that has to repatriate or has to do reburials, like not just even reburials, but you think about like the children from the boarding schools. That's not going to be an easy process to have to like pick up those child remains. And so from there, basically, like they were just put into another storage container until we had the process to rebury. And when we rebury, the land base is literally next to a middle school, like window. And so it's like, what I want, if I was a future ancestor, would I want to be reburied? And that's why I said, like, it's not, like, the most common, because most people, they're not open-minded or calm enough in their mind to hear me out, to say the full story. They're so quick to, like, have a response.
To, like, want to shut you down.
Yeah, and it's like, but hold on, let me get to the end to explain to you. And because if I don't, I know, like, the answers could sound winded, but if I don't give you the full context, you will assume everything in between and think you know, and you don't. And so again, like back to like the trail of truth with that is the reason it's important, is because it's not just us fighting for federal recognition through because we want repatriation and we want a land base to put our ancestors, but across Turtle Island, tribes are facing different things that are like hurting them. Like our, sister tribe with the Amamuten fighting for, like the mountain out there where they're trying to, dig the minerals out of Jurastack. And then you have like when the Trail of Truth, they went over, so just go back into that, is we went up to the capital, made our demands there, came back down to the homelands for we were supposed to have a resolution done by the city that was it was not really shut down, but it's just kind of been just moved at that time, and so they had to continue the trail. They went down south to Pomona, Malibu, met the tribes down there. And then when they got over to Arizona, though, and they hit the Grand Canyons, I think that right there is like when people should have been another wake-up call, because they're literally trying to mine for like the minerals out there, and that's like the uranium mines. And so like we, supported the tribe there that's fighting to protect the Grand Canyons. Like, it's beautiful, it is. But what happens when the Grand Canyons no longer are like the Grand Canyons because they're digged, or there's what's next, fracking? Like, I don't think people realize that this is not just a fight for federal recognition. There are real issues that are going to be facing in the next generations to come if we don't protect. But yeah, so after they left the Arizona, they were in South Dakota for a while. We did a few like horse rides around there, gathered with a lot of relatives. And as we speak now, they're in Minnesota, the Red Lakes. And so we're, moving our way through. The other thing too, like I share is my 17-year-old son is actually on this trail. This is his senior year of high school. And he, he's a very smart, very mature young man for his age. And, he's also a sun dancer now, and so I, heard him out for, I wasn't too comfortable at first to want to let him go, but, I know that this trail means so much more than what people will assume it is, and that is that all across Turtle Island, whether it's federal recognition, whether it's repatriation, whether it's these burial sites, missing murdered Indigenous women, whether it's the lack of the healthcare systems that we have or the lack of resources we have, ICWA, all of these issues combined are allowed to come to light in such a bigger capacity. Like, it's no different than, like in the old days, how things were done when they Alcatraz take over, or like the horse rides that were done back there, or like the massacres that wounded me and people who came over. We're literally traveling across the United States to bring up other nations with us and bring real change in the coming months.
Yeah, it's the rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly, I love that.
And I like that you were saying it's not just for the Muwekma Ohlone people, it's for all tribal nations, because we all face this thing. And people don't understand it unless it happens to them. I was hunting with my dad 2 years ago on our ancestral land, and we were camping. It's the middle of the night, and I just hear this thudding, and I'm like, what the heck is this thudding? It just kept going, and it kind of sounded like a drum, but it wasn't a drum. And we're laying down, and my dad was like, actually, let's go drive around. Let's go see what's happening. It was fracking, land fracking. And it was those pumps and the continual, like, hitting the ground and further digging. And then we were like, oh, this is why there's no wildlife here, because of this continuous thudding. And it might be disturbing for, animals to hear, and it might scare them away. And so we weren't able to hunt on that land. We had to go to another unit, because for tribal hunting, they provide you with like specific units that you can go to. And we weren't able to get anything on that part of the land because they were fracking, and there were so many like tankers and stuff out there, and we're just like, no wonder there's nothing to hunt here, because it's gone, because they're afraid.
And that's the thing. There's how many people were able to like bring that forward. I bet you even if they tried, like, what is the reach that they get? And Muwekma, like, right now too, like on our social medias, you're gonna see we're gonna be a lot more vigilant and more vocal and more visual. I know that our approaches don't seem like the best or the most conventional or the prettiest or most positive, but people also have to understand, like, again, it goes back to even like when I asked the question to like individuals of, if this was you, if this was your people, if this was your fight, like, you can't assume that you understand every aspect of what Muwekma has faced and they've gone through. Again, from the skull part, like with the remain to have to be buried, how many people can stand there and stomach it and not cry?
Yeah.
Like, how many people, like, you think you can, no matter how of a warrior spirit you think you have, you can't touch that skull crying. You can't touch that remain and have like any type of negative. And how many people can do that? And how many generations has Muwekma done excavation after excavation after excavation? How many more times are we going to do that? How many more times are the ancestors can't or are now we can't hunt on our own homelands? And what is it going to be next that we can't withhold ceremony again? It goes backwards in time. And that's why it's important for us to fight the way we are. Again, from a political view that I won't mention, many people have discredited for Muwekma for everything that we do. And they fail to realize why we're fighting the way we are. Is because it is literally like Indian wars never ended. It's not the most comfortable conversation to have. But if you look at what that really means, it means that we have like native on native disagreements that we don't move past. We have native to government. We have native to religion, native to the systems, native to the environment, native to the education. Everything is inclusive to like how we're so disconnected. And it should be about like, how do we move forward and heal? It's not going to be always like what you think is the most positive way to move forward. But I think, in my opinion, so long as we're doing so, we're productive. And at the end of the day, when our relatives come back home, we're hitting the ground running with making sure that we reconnect to our tribal members first, but also reconnecting the communities that we live in. And that's why I like, at least for myself, with community education, is not just the external, but it's also re-educating the members on like maybe they don't know about our history, because I don't know, to be honest, I don't know how many tribal members can sit in the seat and answer questions, especially when it comes to the history. But it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's not something that I'm going to back away from either. Just like it's not something that anybody who's on that trail, they're not coming home. They're coming home when the fight's done. So when, they get to Washington, D.C., they're going to be there earlier. So, also, like, I guess the call to action from here to there is just, follow Trail of Truth, follow Muwekma. Reshare our content. I don't care if you reshare it 100 times a day. Like, reshare our story out there.
The more eyes, the better.
Exactly. But also, any relatives out in, like, Washington, D.C. area for Indigenous Peoples Day, October, what is that, 14th?
14th or 15th.
So on that day, that's when they're expected to arrive at the White House, set up the camp there, and demand to speak to some people. And if not, we have our camera crews ready, and we have the allies of the people that are out there to make sure that we're sharing our story and they're sharing theirs too. Together we share the one story is that we are all still here. and we have a lot of work to do ahead of us.
Yeah. Would you say that part of like what you were sharing right now about just reclaiming, teaching, and continuing this work is part of your vision, part of the goals that Muwekma Ohlone has?
For sure, because I think if we don't do that, we literally we lose a lot, and meaning that like the whole preservation foundation, right? Like that's literally the title. I mean, most places have like something that preserves them, but for Muwekma, it's kind of like back to that first part I was mentioning, like who we are is like we're the last of 600, and I don't like to have to say it like that, but like my personal perspective is that if I don't teach my people or reach out, like, you know, and I'll actually even humble myself to learn, and be quiet enough to understand like what's being said around me and why it's being said. And if we don't do that work and give back, there's nothing, we can't pour from an empty cup. So we can't give what we don't know or don't have.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And for folks who are interested in learning about the Trail of Truth, where can people learn about that?
I would say right now, the best place is social media, especially Instagram. We launched a mini-series called Trail of Truth mini-series. So we have, like I said, mentioned, there is a ground camera crew on site, you know, and they're exposing as much as they can. We're also trying to make sure, like, you know, the horse riders, like, you know, they have their space and they have their, you know, we're not sharing a lot of the cultural stuff, but we at least want to make people aware of like where we're at, what we're doing. And then also too is like it constantly drops like historical facts about Muwekma. So I would say, yeah, social media is like Instagram, TikTok are the two main platforms. In general, information about the tribe, the website, which is muwekma.org. And there's literally, it's Trail of Truth on Instagram and Facebook. I mean, TikTok. Instagram and TikTok.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So some upcoming events that we have are available on the IHC's website, our indianhealthcenter.org/events. You can check the link above to stay up to date to what's going on in IHC and the broader community. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you like our content, check out our social media. Our handle is @IHC San Jose. Thank you for listening again, where everyone is welcome. Bye.